Welcome to the MLM Lunchtime Leadership Show. Today we're going over law number 2, the law of influence. Gonna add some people here to our show real quick. Invites. Hope everybody's doing well. Second day of August, if you can believe that already. And there's my phone. Here we go. There we go. What's happening, everybody? We have Becky on. Hello. As always, if you can let us know where you're joining us from, what city, state, that would be awesome. Country in some cases, right? Hello.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to this second of the 21 Laws of Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. I am Bess McCarty of the MLM Millionaire Club, and this is Jeffrey David Gamble of my Leadership Network, also a certified John Maxwell trainer. And we are so happy to come and spend this 30 minutes with you every lunchtime. To share with you what we can and learn from you what we can about the laws of leadership. Today is a really exciting one, which I think some of you have down, the law of influence, and we'll talk about why that is. If you're watching the replay, we'd love if you type in replay so that we can thank you. And also, I want to hear where you're from. I like seeing how far we can gather together at these things and reach. Our purpose: to help people grow, to educate, empower, and equip entrepreneurs, and create independent servant leaders. John Maxwell has said, everything rises and falls on leadership. To lead well, you must develop all of these 21 things well, all these 21 laws. But never fear, we will go through them one by one, and we will improve ourselves 1% a day, right? And then we improve 365% over a year. So number 2, the law of influence. The true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Right, Jeff?
Correct. So let's get right into this. The law of influence. It says leadership is not title, position, power, or stature. So influence is what leadership really is, the ability to move someone else. And there's 5 actual myths of influence. The management myth, the idea that leading and managing are one and the same thing. I think many people have an issue with building a direct sales company because they're so used to, if they're used to being in a management position, they're so used to getting people to take action right away. And the reason they're used to taking action right away is because there's a, definite consequence for not listening. Most of the time there's consequence for not listening at a job is they're going to fire you, or they're going to reprimand you, or you're going to have to deal with something like that. Whereas inside of, direct sales, the only problem with not moving right away and not taking action right away is there's no money. You don't make anything. You don't earn anything. So people are much more reluctant to get started and use all their fears because, oh, this is a hobby and this isn't full time and this is, part time. So people build all these things in their head. But the management myth definitely exists. If you build enough, you will see it. The more successful the person is that you actually sponsor, you'll hear more of the management myth. Well, why don't these people just do what they're supposed to? I just don't understand. I just met with a lady. She was actually able to hit 6 figures in 9 months with her company. And she hit the right company at the right time, at the right place. And she had been in advertising sales and she had managed people before. And she's like, well, we were kind of all dumb and stupid and just didn't know any better to get started right away. But they were all professionals. They all had spent years inside of their industries, learning how to contact, learning how to invite, learning how to present. They already had the skill set developed. So when they hit the business, they didn't need to learn the skill set. They just needed to learn the product line, how to pitch it. And they were very successful at building a huge team. So the management myth is number one. Number two, the entrepreneur myth. Entrepreneurs are skilled at seeing opportunities and going after them. Just because you're good at identifying, and Benny's with us and Sarah's with us, just because you're good at identifying an opportunity, just because you're good at seeing it before everybody sees it, and just because you're good at implementing some things before everybody, that doesn't necessarily gain you influence and people want to follow you. Because what happens in most brand new companies, what happens in most brand new businesses, there's the formulation stage. And in the formulation stage, what you're going to find is things are going to change a lot. You know, you're going to market one way and then change the marketing, and then you're going to package one way and then change the packaging. You're going to, you know, have a system or process that you're going to go through, and it's going to morph as you get bigger. Because as you get bigger, things change. One extra word, one extra sentence inside of something, once you multiply it times thousands of people, all of a sudden you have more problems. So the entrepreneur myth of just getting there first doesn't necessarily gain you that influence. But a lot of people say, oh my gosh, that guy's an entrepreneur, so he'll do really, really well. In reality, sometimes entrepreneurs are the hardest to get going inside of direct sales because they're used to creating everything. They're used to creating the image. They're used to creating the color. They're used to creating the packaging. Everything has to be designed when you're an entrepreneur. All those decisions have to be made. So when you get in direct sales and all of a sudden all that stuff's done for you and all you have to do is the marketing, all of a sudden they want to get too creative with the marketing and they become non-duplicatable. And that's one thing about that I see about entrepreneurs when I recruit them is the duplicatable factor. Sometimes it's hard to teach because if you're an entrepreneur and especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're a solo artist, meaning, you know, you're self-employed, really not entrepreneurial so much. You might have created a product or service, but you're the only person actually running that whole business. They usually have a greater issue because they're used to running everything. So that leads us to number 3 myth, the knowledge myth. Knowing what to do and influencing others to do it are two very different skill sets. Nathan's with us. What's happening? So if you have the knowledge, I've met so many great people that have the book knowledge, but then they'll be like, this is how it works. And I'll be like, no, that's not exactly how it works. And what we're talking about is the difference between theory and the difference between doing it. The difference between theory and doing it are huge. Once you get into the market and actually start implementing some of these lessons, you can find out very quickly that what you read in a book sometimes where it's like, say it and do it like this, all of a sudden you have to adjust to what? You have to adjust to personalities. You have to adjust to emotions. You have to adjust to, you know, between male and female. You have to adjust to age groups. There's so many adjustments you have to make. I'm like, it doesn't always work exactly like it says in a book because they're not able to factor in every single, you know, variable that's coming up. So the knowledge myth absolutely exists. Again, as you recruit more and more people, you'll understand that that one exists and you'll run into it. Number 4, the pioneer myth. Just because you get there first, if no one follows you, you're not necessarily a leader and doesn't mean you have influence. You'll see this a lot in a new company that launches. Oh my gosh, there's a new company.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh, we have a new product, but we have a new product. We're first. We have a new product in a new sector, in a new marketplace, and that's why you should get in. And people still don't follow them. And they're like, well, why aren't people following me? Well, it's not necessarily just about that. There's all these other qualities of a person. Because remember, when we go out to pitch these companies, the people are first looking at the person. Then they're probably looking at the program, the product, and the compensation plan. But they're still looking at the person first. You know, they're going to judge the entire opportunity by who is pitching it, not by what it is. So that's why you want to work harder on yourself. That's why you want to work harder on the inside. They say you work harder on the inside, you do inside than anything. You know, the outside's kind of easy to dress up. You know, for a lot of us, we can go get our hair done or, you know, cut or trim. You know, we can go put on sharp clothes and all these other things. But the problem is when we show up, we're still there. You know, and then we have, you know, us to deal with. So we bring with us all of our, you know, insecurities, all of our strengths, all of our weaknesses, all of our personality, all of our previous history. You know, do you have a previous history with the person that you're actually speaking to? You know, a history of maybe complaining, a history of, you know, quitting or not following through with other things you do. You know, if you have all this and then you go to pitch, remember, they're remembering all that. That doesn't disappear just because you're first in a business. So the pioneer myth. The fifth one is the positional myth. The positional myth says, if you have a title or position, people will automatically follow me. Now, here's the problem with that. In some cases, the position does work. In some cases, people do have that influence just because of their position. But here's what I found. You'll have massive attrition. They'll recruit people, but they won't be able to keep them. They'll recruit people, but they won't be able to duplicate. They'll recruit people, but nobody will get started actually doing anything. They'll be able to get people in, but not really ever get it going. So using a position by itself, you know, a position of authority, a position of influence inside a job, a manager, you know, sometimes this is somebody who's high up in a company. The military actually solved this very easily. In the military, from what I understand, is if you want to be in a recruiting-based business like this, you cannot go pitch your subordinates. You can't pitch anybody at your level below. You can only pitch people at your same level and above. The reason being is you have to have actual influence to be able to influence them. They don't want people actually getting in thinking they're following orders, you know, and following a program when it has nothing to do with what you're actually doing at work. I thought that was really like smart of them when I read through, and a friend of mine who was a captain in the Army was like, no, I can't go pitch anybody but captain and up. And I was like, well, what about from other, you know, other branches of the military? Other branches are different, but inside of my branch, I cannot go down. I can only go up. And I was like, well, that's actually what we teach inside of direct sales anyway. You want to pitch at your level and above, because if you pitch at your level and above, they're going to pitch at their level and above. And this is where third party becomes so important. We'll talk about that in another lesson. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Bess, because we actually have several more things to cover, but I'm going to get her insight on influence, how and why.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for all that. Ooh, boy, that's a lot. And I want to say hi to Joyce, Julie, Ignacio, Denise, Alan, Lucy, Steve, Mahmoud, Benny, Thomas, Edgar, Nathan, Dawn, and Nancy. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your likes and loves. We appreciate that. And if you are getting value, we'd love if you like, comment, or share. Let some other people know about this too, who could use leadership skills. Story. Summer of 1997, the public was shocked by the deaths of two very important people, and they were just a week apart too, and that was Princess Diana and Mother Teresa. And if you look, these could appear to be like two totally opposite people. Princess Diana was young and tall and glamorous, and she was a princess in England. And Mother Teresa, who had won a Nobel Peace Prize, she was a small, elderly Catholic nun, and she served the poor in India. But yet, these two were voted the world's two most caring people, and therefore the most influential people. You've heard, haven't you, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's why these two people had so much influence to change the tide of history and human events, and they were both very influential among leaders, in the world leaders, so they could influence a lot. So it was 1981 when Diana married Prince Charles, and she didn't really feel real comfortable in that royal role until she found a way that she could raise funds for causes. And so she threw herself into this, and she developed relationships with leaders. Before that, she was just kind of an unknown kindergarten teacher. But in this role, she could develop this and developed relationships with world teachers. It was 1996 that she divorced, and yet her influence grew even greater than her royal family's influence grew. Isn't that something? And it was at her death a year later that there were over 2 billion viewers, twice as many as watched their royal wedding. So could this law be really called, the law of influence, really be called the law of caring? And it said, if you want to test your influence, lead a volunteer organization for 6 months or more, at least 6 months. And I happened to have the privilege, the opportunity of doing that a few years back in San Diego, where for 2 years I headed up 60 state teams across California for volunteer work. And the way that it was growing and thriving and just so happy, the way that I did that was that I told stories. I I did the work, and I told my teams, there was 60 teams, I told them the stories of how much I enjoyed doing the work in this volunteer organization. So not only did I care about the teams, but I cared about the people that we were reaching as a result and in our mission. So that's, I know that many of you listening right now and listening to the replay, you've got this law nailed. If the caring part of it anyway, you've got this nailed. I know your passion, your servanthood for many of you on the call. So thank you and congratulations for all of that. And back to Jeff.
So guys, living the law of influence, there's 7 factors of leadership. Number 1 is character. So who they are, you know, who they are as a person. You can just kind of tell certain people have influence because when they walk in the room, people just tend to gravitate towards them, and they gravitate towards them not because necessarily they're tall or necessarily they, you know, are strong and have muscles, or, you know, they might be, you know, a beautiful person, but you can actually see this, you know, certain people just have influence. They could be the smallest person in the room, but everybody gravitates towards them. Why? Because they're the ones with the character. They have the influence of the room. Number 2, relationships, who they know. Certain people, because of who they know, because of who they're around, you know, I was recently, you know, had a conversation with somebody and they said, blah, 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 and they're going to actually get in front of this certain person. And I was like, well, why is that? Why? I don't know that person. Why is that person important? They said, because it's the best friend of one of the #1 money earners in the entire world. And I was like, oh, well, that person has some influence then. So, you know, it's very interesting, you know, sometimes that's, you know, that's what you know, that's the key factor in, you know, introducing the person is actually who they know and who they're around. John Maxwell talks about in his book, you know, relationships for him. He was actually introduced to John Wooden simply because he asked the right question at the right time. And that's why questions are so important. He actually asked this certain person. He was sitting at, I can't remember if it was a lunch or a dinner. And the guy's like, he asked him the question. He goes, well, who's the, you know, who would be somebody that you know that you think that I should meet? And the guy's like, well, I'm really good friends with John Wooden. Would you like to meet him? And John's like, yes. He's like, now I had things on my schedule. I had an event. I had this. And he's like, I cleared my schedule. And he was actually able to meet with him close to a dozen times before he passed away and build a friendship with him simply because of the relationship he had with somebody else. So, you know, don't count anybody out. Everybody's important. Everybody has something that you can learn from, and everybody has someone that you can learn from. 3, knowledge, what they know. Certain people just have, you know, knowledge about what they're doing and who they're around, that they have the ability to open doors that you might not be able to open. They might know where people are going to be at the right place at the right time. They might know the person at the door. They might know, you know, a waiter or waitress that can get you in front of somebody. So again, don't count anybody out. Knowledge of what they know, super important. Number 4, intuition, what they feel. Certain people just know when things need to happen. I've got, you know, a couple friends like this. They're like, hey, things are changing. We need to do this. You know, I'm getting out of one thing and I'm changing over to something else. They just have intuition of when stuff's going to happen because they've got enough connections in industries where they just kind of know and have a feeling based on conversations, based on what's going on, what's going to happen next. Number 5, experience, where they've been. When I have, issues or problems, I usually make phone calls to a couple friends of mine that have been in the industry for years. They've made millions of dollars inside of the industry. And I can say, I'm kind of thinking this, what are your thoughts on this? And because of what they've seen and the number of businesses and the number of people they've been around, they can give me a 10,000 mile up description of what's actually happening. And almost in every case, they've been dead on to give me advice on what's about to happen, what's going on in the industry, how I need to say something, how I need to change something. So where somebody's been and what they've been through, again, can help you so much when it comes to influencing others. 6, past experiences. This is somebody who might have hit big inside of an industry. We recently got a phone call about a gentleman that I just found out has joined an organization. And I'm like, well, why was this guy so special? They said, well, he actually had the largest team underneath one of the largest guys inside of that company. 5 or 6 or 7 different super influential people that were on his team, a giant organization. He was actually the largest organization underneath this one particular gentleman. So, past success of what they've done, this can be influential. I was like, man, I want to talk to this guy. What's going on? 7, ability. What they can do. Certain people are just able to come in, and especially inside of direct sales, we've got, several individuals that I've worked with in the past that just have a tremendous ability. They have the ability to, influence the room. There was this particular gentleman on a team that I had years ago that when he showed up, the room actually grew by 25%. It was absolutely astounding that every time, regardless if there were 100 people in the room or 10 people in the room, if he showed up, the room would grow by 25% instantly. Why? He had influence with people. And, at first I didn't understand it. And then once I finally understood that he was the one that had influence, I knew that finding people like him and getting him in the room with his people would absolutely, change the environment. It would change everything inside the room. So I worked harder to bring him out than anybody. And that made the team grow and grow and grow and grow. And there were thousands of people that ended up on that team because of that one person and their ability to influence others. So leading others to the law of influence. Leader sees more, sees further, and sees before everybody else. So lead from a no leverage position. That's what John says. The number one thing is leading from a no leverage position. And inside of direct sales, there isn't a huge amount of leverage. We can't tell people you have to do this, but what we can do, and this is what I learned, in most companies, what you can do is you can place another individual underneath another individual. And when I started doing this, what I realized is I was able to use the influence, my influence of being able to build and structure underneath somebody to influence somebody to come out, to influence somebody to engage, and I just kept building underneath somebody. Imagine starting with one guy and then having 2 guys underneath you and then 4 guys underneath you and then 8 guys underneath you. Eventually, the organization that I was actually physically talking about before, the gentleman that brought out 25 people, one of my good friends from the mortgage business was actually above him. He was in between. There were about 4 or 5 guys in between. This one particular gentleman stayed in the business. He stayed active and had that entire organization underneath him. I believe it was, at one point, it was about 3,000 some people underneath him because I just placed straight down underneath him and the group exploded. And what ended up happening is I would call that guy every single at the end of the month and say, hey, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you again for, your influence. Thank you again for staying in. We really appreciate what you're doing because you are in, but you're not engaging. That $4,000 went to me instead of you. It was a voluntary organization. He didn't have to show up. He was going to be in that position regardless. But what I did is I started using the influence of the dollars that were coming through the organization to share with him how much money was passing him by every single month, every single month, every single month. Now, the interesting thing is that organization still exists today, and I left it 8 years ago. So, talking about building for long term, that's what we're talking about doing here. Lead your peers. The second hardest thing to do outside of leading a voluntary organization is leading your peers, people at your same level. People who make what you make, live where you live, do what you do. Those are the hardest people to influence. Why? because at that point, you don't have the leverage of making more money. You don't have the leverage of a position over them. You don't have all those other factors that people might say, well, I should do this because of this reason. They're only doing it because they know you, they like you, and they trust you. So that's a huge thing. When you see somebody who can influence their peers, and a lot of them, you know that person has that character and has that influence with people. They must have something special about them. So list some words or phrases that indicate an opportunity to teach the law of influence. Well, it seems like I know a lot of people, but I can't get them to do anything. You'll hear that a lot. I just can't get in front. That's another one. I just can't get in front of people. I can't get their time. Sometimes it's what you're doing. Sometimes it's what you're saying. Sometimes it's who you've been in your past that is influencing today, because you've jumped from thing to thing, because you've screwed around, because you've, maybe lost a business or lost money, or, what I find is especially people who have relationship problems and talk about their relationships problems all the time, they might find the perfect business to be in, but because of all this other drama that surrounds them, people avoid those situations. So sometimes it's just having those conversations with people and figuring it out. Do 3 questions followers ask leaders. These are the 3 questions. These are 3 things that people are going to ask when they decide to get in, and not when they decide to get in, but when they decide to build. Number 1 is, do you care about me? Do you care about me as a person? Am I just a number on the team, or do you care about me as a person? Are you really trying to help? Number 2, can you help me? This is an important on, do you know what you're doing? Can you help me? Watch this. If you're not making money, the person does not believe that you can help them make money. Obviously, if you're not making money, how in the world can you help them? They're looking at the paycheck. Again, people you know, people you like, people you trust. The trust factor comes in as, can you help me? Is, are you producing what I want? 3, can I trust you? That's a whole nother one. Are you going to be here long term? Are you going to be doing what you say you're going to do? Are you going to follow through? Are you going to build? Are you going to structure? So this is one of the things that I've always used depth inside of an organization. We'll use a direct sales network marketing term here. I use depth to show people when people start, inside of a company, I've always built underneath them. I said, look, if you get in, I'm driving this organization straight down. And by me driving the organization down, I'm showing them that this is going to work, that you can trust what I say I'm going to do. As the organization gets deeper, as more people get in, as we drive those legs down, that actually helps. So that's something that, we can talk on another call, or that's why Bess and I do the coaching we do. That's why we have the show on Sunday to actually teach some of these basic skills. This is part of what we talk about. Part of what we go over is how to structure and build, so that way some of these lessons we build into what we're doing. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Bess for her thoughts.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I took down that note about how John Maxwell met John Wooden. Who's an important person you think I should know? I love that. That's a great question. And Jeff is, to me, an example of those 3 things that he just mentioned. Do you care? Do you have the expertise, and can I trust you? Really, that's why we're teaching now today, because as I got to know Jeff, definitely he helped so generously, just supporting me and my work. And if I had a question, he was so generous with his time. If my clients and students needed something, he'd just jump on these calls just for fun. I mean, just to support, just for love. He was super, super generous with us. We knew that he cared, and we trusted him because of that, and also because he has all this huge experience. In case some of you don't know, he's personally recruited over 500 people front line, built 2 teams of over 5,000, and his teams have produced over 10 million in sales in his past history and experience. So that's why we're teaching. That's why I was drawn to work with Jeff. Julie, thank you for your summaries. I love when you put down notes of to help people visually read this, because some people are audio and some are visual, and so your notes definitely help the visual people to kind of anchor in what we're talking about today. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for the likes and loves. We're going to take questions in just a few minutes. So if anyone has a favorite takeaway that you've gotten from this, we'd love to hear it. An insight, an experience, a story that you have briefly in the comments that we could share with people, we'd like to. Any questions about this law of influence or leadership or network marketing, this is a place to ask to network marketing coaches. So we'll take questions in just a moment, and would like to share with you a little story about the caring part and about the trust part. There was a boy who had a temper, and he would get angry at people and kind of and hurt people. And his father wanted to help break him of this. So he said, okay, every time that you get angry at somebody, you go and pound a nail into the fence in the backyard. And so the boy did that. At first there was like 10 nails a day in there, and then they got less and less per day, until over time the boy wasn't pounding any nails into the fence, because that had helped him be aware of it, kind of cure him of it. And so he had all these hundreds of nails still in the fence in the backyard, and his father said, okay, now go pull them out. And the boy happily did that, because that was a sign of all of his anger. So he's going to get rid of his anger. He pulled those all out. And the father said, good, now look and see. They still left holes, didn't they? And so he was showing that your past still follows you to some degree. You can rewrite past and have a new canvas, but like Jeff was saying, your past can still follow you. You might have to get over that, even though you have a new pattern of caring and being kind to people today and helpful in service. Your past, our past, still follows us to some degree, and it might take time to heal those holes that are there. Over to Jeff.
So with that, guys, this particular principle, how do you build influence? A lot of people are like, well, how do I build this? How do I get this? One of the things I could say is study the 21 laws, but also you want to study winning with people. Another one of John C. Maxwell's books, and we're actually going to be going over Everybody Communicates, Few Connect. For those of you who don't know, I actually run a generic meaning it's non-company specific, non-product specific. There's no comp plans discussed, but we actually go over that once a month inside of a training. Because I'm a John C. Maxwell coach, we're actually giving that information out and training people about it. So we'll put in the comments the link to actually that event. But Everybody Communicates, Few Connect. Winning with people. Those two things will help you so much with the law of influence, being able to, become influential around a group of people, to be able to help people grow. It's so important to get these factors. Now, here's why it's so important inside of direct sales, because your greater ability to influence, the less work you have to do to be able to accomplish what you're trying to do. Understand, some people, it just seems like some people were able to recruit people and build teams so effortlessly. It wasn't because they were saying the right thing to the right people, which also helps. Saying the right thing helps. Getting in front of the right people helps. But it's because they were a person of influence that allowed them to get in front of these people so effortlessly and grow so effortlessly. So here's the thing. It is something that can be learned. It is something that can be taught, but you have to get around the people who know how to do it to be able to learn these lessons. So with that, guys, we try to hold this to about 30 minutes. We'll go ahead and wrap this up now. I'll turn this back over to Bess for any closing thoughts. We appreciate everybody for being on. And as always, every day at noon Eastern Standard Time, we actually do this show online, the MLM Lunchtime Leadership Show. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff, for all that you teach. And Nancy was concurring with me, Nancy Siegel, and she says, yes, Jeff is always there if people need help or want to learn. So thank you so much for all that you do tirelessly. That Facebook group, if you want to join us there, if you're not a member already, you can go and request membership there at the MLM Lunchtime Leadership Show, and then we can add you there. That gives you the notices, the replays, a free book to follow along. So we'd love to have you. Nathan, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Everyone here today. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, guys.